Segunda mesa redonda
Good afternoon.
que va a moderar el secretario
I
general
think
del
it's
Sindicato
probably
de
time to
Sylviculteurs de
start
Sud-Ouest, de aquí de
the
Aquitania,
next
socio
roundtable.
de la UCE. Entonces, Eric, je vous
Mr.
donne
Eric Dumontet, the General Secretary of the Union of South-West Foresters, will be our facilitator. Thank you very much for your invitation and for this great conference, and happy birthday!
Bon anniversaire à nouveau.
Happy birthday,
Bon anniversaire
Juan
à
Miguel.
nouveau. Hein? Bien, merci pour ces moments d'échange et ces travaux. Donc là,
Thank
on va
you
commencer
for these
la deuxième table
discussions
ronde
and
avec un sujet
contribution.
qui est quand même
We'll start the
essentiel
next
ici.
roundtable on a very important
La gestion des forêts,
topic:
du changement climatique
forest
et
management,
de l'innovation.
climate change and
C'est-à-dire
innovation.
de ce travail et
So,
de cette, je vois que ça attire, ça passionne.
I can see that it draws a lot of people in, right? So we'll be talking about the work that is being done by foresters and the entire industry on innovation, so that we can find solutions and answers to climate change. So, for our roundtable, I have an excellent panel with me, Berenice Kimpe from XYLOFUTUR. She is the head of Europe mission for the competitivity division. So what is that? My organization is supporting innovation through a collaborative research project. So our mission is to be the interface between companies and universities. And we are working more specifically on forests and wood and the wood industry. We have about 280 members, 70% being companies, mostly SMEs, and we do have a network dedicated to startups as well. Thank you, Berenice. Next to you, Inazio Martinez de Arano. He is the BIOREGIONS facility coordinator. Could you maybe tell us a few words about your organization? First off, thank you very much for organizing this very interesting conference. So let me start with my mission, my organization. It's an international organization. We are part of a network with about 130 million members. We are working within a network. We have a very clear assignment, using knowledge for practical actions. We do need policies that would be informed by science. And more recently, we have been working on the interface between research, innovation and policies. 2.5 years ago, we created BIOREGIONS, coordination platform, working on the economic transition of the wood industry. Our main objective is not really to develop the forest industry, but to support all economic sectors. We are also working on manufacturing sectors that use biomass, but to also help enhancing ecosystemic services and bringing together the different services that nature can provide. So how can I generate wealth by harnessing biomass and ecosystem services? Thank you very much. To my left, Francisco Dans. Francisco, we've known each other for a long time, and I'm really happy to see you. We've talked about the creation of the USSE in '89, and I think that you're the only remaining founding member of the USSE with us, so you are our wise person. You are also the founder of the Fondation ARUME for Galicia, And
ARUME,
also,
j'espère que j'ai bien prononcé, c'est vrai?
C'est ça,
Est-ce que tu peux nous en dire un peu plus sur cette fondation?
and you're also head of the Fundación ARUME. Can you tell us a little bit about this foundation?
Gracias, Eric. Solo tengo el mérito
Thank
de ser
you,
viejo.
Eric.
Ese es un problema. Pero
Well,
muy contento
apparently my
de
only
estar
quality is that I'm old,
estar en
but I'm
la
really
creación
happy
de todas
to
estas
have been
organizaciones
there
de Europa
when these Southwest
y
organizations
haber
were
conocido
created.
personalidades como
I'm happy that I was lucky enough to meet some people, such as my president, Fernando Molina,
una anécdota que me permitirá. En Santiago de Compostela
and I share a personal
Una buena comida.
story in Santiago, Compostela. When we founded
hemos ido
our organization, we enjoyed a very
fotografiando
good
nuestra
meal, but
evolución,
since then, quite a lot of things have
la
happened.
palabra.
We were able to
Hemos aprendido
follow
mucho de Aquitania,
our
hemos aprendido
evolution.
mucho del País Vasco, de Portugal, ellos también de nosotros.
We developed a lot of actions in Portugal, in Spain, so we exchange a lot with all different organizations. I'm now the vice president of Fundación ARUME.
En galego,
ARUME means pine leaf in Galician, and our clear mission is to promote coniferous trees because we are facing a very dire situation in Galicia,
hemos dedicado 8 organizaciones sectoriales
where we are losing pine trees at an alarming rate.
industria de la madera, prescriptores, arquitectos.
Our associations bring together architects, forest owners, nursery persons, and we are promoting wood and the use of coniferous wood.
En el patronato de la fundación, un
And
banco
we
gallego
also included a bank, a Galician bank in our foundation, Banca, that's the name of the bank. It provides us with a financial and institutional support. That's very important.
Fundamentalmente la restauración de montes,
So we work on forests, degraded forest
una plaga.
restoration.
Otro eje de trabajo
They may
es
be
el
degraded
I+D,
due to the
especialmente
presence of a pest or a
en
fire.
mejora genética de coníferas. Y otro tema muy importante es
But
la
we are also
promoción de la
working on
madera,
improving
el
the
uso de la
presence of
madera,
coniferous
especialmente
trees,
en la
and we are
construcción,
promoting the use of
y
wood
también
as
en la
well.
difusión del uso y
More
el valor de la
specifically
madera.
on building
Una de las actividades es organizamos todos
and
los
how
años un
to
foro
enhance the value of
Piñeiros,
wood. Every year we organize
al cual
a
están todos
forum
invitados, que será ahora el 25
where
de
you're
octubre
all
en Santiago.
invited. Please join us. It will be held on the 25th of October this year.
Merci beaucoup, Francisco. Et il me reste à
Thank
vous
you
présenter
very much,
Barry
Francisco.
Gardiner,
And
qui est
our
chercheur
last
à
speaker
l'Institut
is Barry
européen
Gardiner. He's a
des
researcher
forêts
at the
cultivées,
European Institute
qui
for
est
Cultivated
principalement
Forests.
expert sur tous les
He's an
risques et dommages,
expert on
abiotiques,
all
des forêts,
abiotic
hein.
risks
On
and
a
damages for
beaucoup
forests,
lu et apprécié tous les
to
travaux,
forests.
notamment sur les
So
tempêtes.
we read all your work on storms and the consequences of storms, but we know that you have much more skills because you're also an expert on fire risks. Barry, could you maybe tell us a little bit more about the IEFC or your organization?
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for this invitation to come to this conference. I'm going to speak in English. It's more safe than in French. And as you can see, I'm an Englishman that got left behind when my stupid country decided to disappear from Europe. IEFC is a multi-actor network focused on resilient and sustainable management of planted forests. We began as a collaborative initiative between USE and INRA 20 years ago, and built on the collaboration that existed between foresters in Aquitaine, Galicia, and Euskadi. And now we have partner organizations in Portugal, Spain, France, Ireland, UK, Germany, Italy, and Norway. Our focus is on making the connection between researchers and practitioners and policymakers, and to engage in knowledge exchange, organize events and workshops, and to provide access to tools and information focused on planted forests. And very importantly, we seek to provide an exchange of information between all actors and to avoid a top-down approach. And we believe that with the changing climate, we need more and more to work collaboratively between regions, countries, and between everyone engaged in forestry and the wood-based industries. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Barry. Alors,
Thank you very much, Barry. So my first question goes to Barry and Francisco. I know this is going to be a very broad question, but what is your assessment of various climate and weather-related events that we experienced this summer, especially their consequences on southern forests? And more broadly speaking, how can we be prepared, better prepared, to face these events?
Okay.
Barry, do you want to start?
Okay. Oh, gosh. That's a huge question. I think the most important thing to understand is that this summer's extreme events is not a one-off. It's going to happen again. And so, for example, our biggest risk for forestry in Aquitaine is now likely to be no longer storm damage, but droughts, and more fires. So there's no longer any such thing as business as usual. We're living in a different world, and we have to adapt to that world. So there's solutions that we can prepare ourselves in the short, medium, and long term. In the short term, we can provide increased and improved resources for monitoring the level of fire risk, initial ignition of fires, and methodologies for fighting fires. In Aquitaine, we already have one of the best firefighting systems in Europe, but as events showed this summer, that can be overwhelmed when the conditions are extreme. We also need to be very aware of the fuel load in the forest and how can it be reduced. For example, by cleaning the dead wood from the forest floor or removing understory growth. And to reduce the impact of drought, we need to reduce competition for water from herb species and to potentially put mulch into the forest to keep the soil as moist as possible. These are short-term, immediate solutions. Medium-term, we really need to look at the genetic resource and, for example, breed trees that are more resistant to drought. So, for example, this is already happening at INRA, where they're making use of provenances of maritime pine from North Africa to improve the resistance to drought. Changing species is not necessarily the answer. We need to find the best species, provenance, and genetic material that is suited to survive now and in a future climate and to deliver the objectives of the forest. No point in just planting trees for the sake of planting trees. What are we trying to achieve? That's the medium term. In the long term, we need to plan at the landscape level. We need to make fire gaps between houses and the forest, or houses need to be self-protecting against fires like they are in Australia, in order that the firefighters fight the fire in the forest and don't become diverted to stop houses burning. The urban interface is crucial. We need to introduce diversity in the landscape in order to create fire barriers. This could be by having more areas of agriculture or more solar farms within the forest, or it could be by coordinating clear felling to isolate areas of forest and reduce the connectiveness of the forest. We cannot have a forest structure that allows fires to move with little hindrance through the landscape. And the same could be true of disease. But this requires coordination and a willingness for owners and policymakers to collaborate at a departmental and regional level. And it also is going to require political will to make difficult and potentially very unpopular decisions. That's me.
Merci beaucoup, Barry. C'était très complet.
Thank you, Barry. That was very comprehensive because I know it's a difficult task to give so much information in just 2 minutes. So what about you, Francisco? I think I agree with what you said. The outstanding has become the norm, if I may say so. In 2017, like in Portugal, we had an outstanding impact due to the fires and climate events with major and violent fires. You know what climate exception is all about. But this year we had the drought that was quite outstanding, and we had biomass retention in the forest. So we have side A and side B. Side A, there's a high risk of most of the inhabitants of the south of Europe will end up living in the forest. Like for Bordeaux, in Mont-de-Marsan, the inhabitants live in the middle of the forest. Same for the Basque Country, in a highly populous area, and that's a major risk. Because of the population. On the other hand, the side B, which is the population leaving, depopulation, the lack of management. We don't have people in the rural world anymore, so we have to work with those two sides, those two key factors. We're asking society to become aware, to raise awareness. People in the forest do not realize it's actually a risk. So it's important that we can communicate and spread the information and spread the word. But as a forester, we must be able to have a critical approach and make some critics and find out more about where we stand. So my sector that I know very well is the Galicia region. I'm not talking about a one-size-fits-all action, but our forestry actions should be more rigorous. We cannot afford to continue with solutions that date back to the 70s. It doesn't work. The human interface with the forest has to be better managed, and the biodiversity, the water, the soil, all of these requires more rigor from a technical point of view, and I guess it's a challenge. And this does not solely rely on the European Union. This relies on the responsibility of the foresters, but we have something in common, which is a better control of combustible material in the wood, and this requires specific management also. This is universal. So same for the Basque Country. The actions in forestry management in the south of Europe have things in common, so we cannot afford to always share the same criteria. And because each problem is different in the forest. I'm not saying we're smarter than others, but we have 200 years of experience managing the forest. And I fully agree with Barry. I fully agree with what he said. So you were talking about new technologies for innovation, and we have to be able to use them to be more efficient. And I'm asking Berenice and Inazio, we do know that today the new technologies around information, communication are absolutely essential in the economic sector, in this, and also in the industrial sector, in order to better communicate on this sector. And so based on the knowledge that you have on this particular sector, how do you incorporate those new technologies in the forestry industry, in the forest industry, in order to improve our practices in this particular economic sector? Who should we start with? Berenice? Just 3 or 4 minutes, each of you. So when you talk about digital transition, it's something that is very broad. It's about bureautics and software related to commercial activities and stock management up to the implementation of AI with software to monitor the forests. Depending on the integration level of these new technologies within the companies, well, things may vary according to the size of the company. I've talked about it with one of our members, and he said there is digital integration in the broadest sense in the very large companies like cooperatives that develop their own tools to have very specific tools. So the integration may vary from one company to another, depending on the size of the company. And there's also another key factor that does have an impact on the integration process. It's about the age of the foresters and the generation, because some foresters are less keen to include those new technologies in their systems. So this is what has been noticed within XYLOFUTUR with the partner of a project interregional projects with Nouvelle-Aquitaine, Spain and Portugal. And this Green Market project is there to help the companies, including SMEs, develop their own digital tools. And a survey had been made on the integration of digital tools and to find out more about the obstacles to this particular digital integration. So beyond the financial aspect, there's also the time factor that is needed, and also the lack of skills to fully embrace those new technologies. This takes time, and this requires a lot of training, and I guess it could be a major asset to be able to attract young people in this sector. Thanks to those tools, as a result, the sector would become more attractive. So that's what I could say about the digital tools used in our particular sector. Yeah, we have an approach. This reminds me of a 2006 study by the European Commission. How do we perceive the industry, the forest industry in general? And the answer is, and it's been raised before, it's a primitive sector which is sort of lagging behind with very little technology, and it's not very attractive for somebody who's about to join the labor market. But it's not really true on the field, and it's a very technological sector with cutting-edge technologies. And in the south of Europe, the paper industry, the companies, and some companies use a lot of technologies, but there are other sectors which are family-based companies, small-sized companies, and they may reproduce that sort of primitive system or model because they have no other opportunities. And there's also a lot of diversity. Second observation is there a regional development model that is not sustainable, that is not digitalized. I'm saying this because to adopt or embrace these technologies, we have to be aware that there's a shortage in circularity. And this transition is very important. You really have to come to terms with this. And development must be achieved, but we must keep a close target in mind with the right direction. I think a lot of work needs to be done in that regard. Obviously, this is a very rich sector with a lot of people doing wonderful things in logistics, blockchains, and for the carbon footprint, we have many possible solutions, but it's in sectors that are a bit weaker, if I may say so. Well, for small-sized companies, for instance, or family-owned companies, it's different. The first thing we should do, I guess, is an agenda with a specific digitalization plan. And we have to know what are the priority actions, where we should act, actions that we could actually support. The goal that you have to keep in mind is obviously the quality-price ratio. And I wonder, do we really want the owners of the forest to embrace technology? If yes, should this go along with individual properties, or should we work collectively? Because there are many, many initiatives. So we want to be able to decide what we want, to find out what are the opportunities in order to have a more positive approach, because some practices require a lot of attention. It's not only about education. You have to, consider the structure as a whole. So I'm going to ask questions to each of you individually about your own skills. I'll start with you, Marie. This morning we talked about forestry operations and forestry and plantations and so on, and indigenous varieties. And our main concern was obviously economic, and there was also a real concern for the protection of biodiversity, because it is at the very heart of the forestry practices, and it's part of the forest owners' expectations. So, as an owner, what means does he have to try to prevent and fight against biotic and abiotic risks on the plots?
Okay, so I think with the background to this is the new EU forest strategy, which has recently been published, and it's full of excellent ambitions. It has a very strong emphasis on biodiversity and human well-being and ecosystem services provided by the forests. However, the strategy also acknowledges there are 2.1 million people working directly in the traditional forest-based sector, and another 1.2 million people working in wood-based furniture manufacture and in industries based around paper. And overall, wood-based industries account for approximately 20% of manufacturing enterprises across the EU, with an enormous gross value. Okay, so it's clear that forests and wood-based industries are a key part of helping to mitigate climate change and to help the EU move towards a zero-carbon economy by 2050. At the same time, we're facing unprecedented challenges because of the changing climate. We have absolutely no experience of the conditions that we face, and looking backwards for solutions is unlikely to be very helpful. For example, the recent huge outbreak of bark beetles and the subsequent damage to Norway spruce in Central Europe is unprecedented. To adapt to our future, we need to maintain every tool available to us as foresters, whether it's the species we grow or the management systems we implement. Nothing must be discarded because we don't know exactly what is coming over the next few decades. So I want to give an analogy. It would be like asking a painter to paint a beautiful sunset, but only with brown and green paint. We need the best system to meet the objectives set for each forest or woodland that can survive now and with the predicted climate over the lifetime of trees. I don't think we can legislate to tell people what to do across Europe. It has to be local solutions. However, within the landscape, we need to increase our forest diversity, to increase the overall resistance of our forests. This is to avoid investing everything in one species or in one management system that works now but turns out to be very vulnerable in a future climate. And all these factors point to the fact that we need to work more closely together than ever at local, regional, national and international levels to share knowledge and experience. Things are changing so fast, we need to learn from those people who already have experience of these changed conditions. So it's a very long-winded answer to your question, but I think we have to be ready to try anything, and we have to learn from people who already have experience of these conditions. Okay.
Merci beaucoup, Barry. C'est effectivement.
Thank you very much, Barry. It's a key point for IEFC to share this knowledge. Of course, this is directly related to SSE. So we're smarter when we work together, we work with a group rather than staying alone, isolated. Francisco, so we know the significance of coniferous trees in the forest bioeconomics. So this morning we saw some figures on the surface areas and the harvesting and harvested surfaces. So because there's been major decline in the surface areas of coniferous trees in Galicia, how could the foundation play a role in restoring those forests and also by promoting those coniferous trees for the forest and for the benefit of the economy and the environment as well? I will start by starting with the economic part. How did we change? How did we reverse a downward trend in the use of coniferous trees in Galician forests until we finally opted for recovery? So all along the process, we've been talking about the low prices of the wood. How could we sort of reactivate the wood? Because the main interest for each owner was about this. So in this regard, I have to say we're quite lucky. Maybe the stars were in our favor, but I guess we had a lot of drive, and we were really willing to increase the price of wood and regain hopes for our sector, despite nematode and all other pests. You know, the price of wood at the worldwide level has increased. It has increased on the market, and it's proved to be very helpful for us. But it's not only about that, because gradually we shifted to the financial aspects and the funding, and this played a key role in the process. And in order to gain resources for the funding of the recovery of downgraded forests, we came up with a great idea to issue a Spanish decree to get resources from large companies, and then we were able to use them to buy emission rights. We were clever enough, and we thought ahead, and we did things in advance. And it's very interesting. So large groups of companies in Spain do fund the downgraded forest. And ARUME Foundation acted as a driving force in this particular initiative. You know, we've been talking about groups like Inditex, or groups on cooperatives or dairy cooperatives that really focus on this market. Not talking about the general markets. I guess the Spanish legislation in this particular area, despite its shortcomings, it has still proven to be very good. It allowed us to obtain a lot of money, and we've achieved it, and we've been quite successful so far. And we've been able to recover highly affected forests. Another point is that the forest sector, forestry, in Spain and also in Galicia, mostly in Galicia, is something that when I think about my company or myself, I think it's good, but when I think about the entire chain, it's not that great. You know, we set funding goals and compensation goals, and the aim was to have €0.50 per 1 cubic meter of harvest. That is to say, so we had €1 million revenue per year. for a minimum amount. So we reached a critical point in the process. So we have to think about the genetic improvement, genetic progress to sort this out. So we have a scientist who works in our research center. We worked with our Chilean colleagues and made the most of their knowledge. And we signed agreements with public administration in order to boost the entire process. And we've been working in that direction since. And we've been pretty obsessed with it because we have cutting-edge material, we have the best replanting techniques, and there are other points for research that are available. But we rarely talk about it. For instance, the soil is absolutely essential as a resource. And you have to keep in mind that the soil itself is the best system to store CO2, not the trees. And the problem in Galicia after the fires, we have soils that are no longer fertile, and we have reduced their depth and their surface, and therefore we defined some goals to add more mineralization to the grounds and soils. And in some areas, we bring some inputs in the grounds to boost fertility. And that's a priority research goal for me. And I think this is a very important topic. Same as water, the soil resource is very important. And then comes the use of wood, the wood promotion for bioconstruction. That's also an obsession. Thanks to the help of the authorities and the industry also, we were able to build the first plank industry in Galicia, and we also work with builders, construction companies, and the goal is to decarbonate the housing. These are just ideas, obviously, but these are smart ideas for property development. But it's obvious that we need to get this started in order to achieve fast success. Events like the one I mentioned earlier on, we should open up to the society. The entire forest, all the forests should be open to the population. This is really key, because in this way we will achieve full support from society. So you've talked about the bioeconomy, development and research. So something that's very important is obviously research, development and innovation in Inazio, because when you talk about bioeconomy, you need to have the favorable context, a good regulatory framework, a good financial framework, research and development and innovation within the companies. For you as a professional, you have a sort of a transversal approach. So how do you perceive the incentives from the private and public sectors in innovation? Good question. First of all, I would like to say that when we think about the forest sector, forestry, what do we include in this sector? Bioeconomy involves construction, textile, and forestry. The Finnish company has a biorefinery in Germany with a large chemical ecosystem, and they produce plastic chips with and also with spruce wood and the pneumatic beech wood. Sorry. the pneumatic world also works with the forestry sector. So when you talk about bioeconomy, we have to see how we could cooperate with other sectors, not only the forestry sector. The idea is to find out how we could have an environmental economic impact. How could we transform it? That means that the relation has to be different so that we can innovate better. We do biochemistry to develop specific projects in this industry. I mean, this is fundamental. Second stake, what can we do to develop things? You know, there are different sectors at stake. Capital funds, commercial sectors, universities. So there's a strategy for bioeconomy. But if we look carefully, we can see that the conditions, the right conditions have to be put in place so that things work smoothly. The natural resources shall be considered as a whole. Biomass should be of good quality, but also we need a market. So how is it perceived by the mainstream public? How are those actions perceived? Well, we need to provide sort of a learning support. In Finland, there are a lot of biotechnologies. How could I be more attractive for my own sector? How can I opt for a transversal approach in my company? How can I combine all those aspects? Obviously, this is very complex. And this particular interface requires more attention towards a specific professional sector, because this means additional innovation, and innovation is the key. And another point that was raised during the seminar is that, you know, we were talking about social acceptance and social involvement. Every economy has different perspectives, and biomass itself comes from the landscapes with people who have a vision and different interests. And we should keep this in mind. And so we must be able to provide the right answers. As Francisco said, this requires a strong eco-responsibility. And above all, we have to show that we can then produce biomass. And we have to also be able to do troubleshooting. But we have to end the paradigm. We need political priorities, we need areas for collaboration, and we must overcome all the obstacles that are ahead of us. And we must teach our students about life sciences. Learning is important. We have to stimulate, and we need to have a positive vision, and we have to be able to sort of create some space. And in this space, we could include all the various stakeholders from different backgrounds and different regions. And together, they could foster digitalization in a very efficacious way. And all companies have a key role to play in this process.
Of course, the question of financing is always key in innovation, but there is also another obstacle to innovation, and that is isolation. Forest owners who are not part of a network, for example, can't know what is happening in other forests, in companies as well. If you're not connected to one another, you may not know what's happening. So that's where competitivity divisions are very important to bring people together. So if we go back on your poll that you presented earlier, how do you further or foster innovation with the different partners, private and public partners, to try and find ways to generate support for innovation. So as I was saying, our pool or division is made up of university, experts, companies, but also funders, financiers, donors. So the question of isolation, the lack of exchanges between researchers and companies, that is something that we all are aware of. It's important for people to talk to one another, but it's not always that easy. For example, in universities, we do know that sometimes laboratories that are just next to one another may not have a lot of exchanges. And it may also be complicated to find the proper economic agent or the proper company to foster a specific innovation. It's also complicated for an economic agent to identify the proper or right laboratories or university, because university is a rather complex system, right? So that's where we play a very important role to create that bridge between companies and universities. And when I say companies, of course, we include forest owners. So we are here so that to help them identify the proper partners. But then I think there's another very important point. The words that we use or that university researchers use is not the same as the ones used by companies. So we are here to make sure that people understand each other, so that these two very separate words can get into a discussion and so that they can agree on what type of innovation they need. Because when we're talking about innovation, we're not just talking about inventing something. It means that a market has to exist. So our role is to bring together a forest owner who has a technological issue, and will bring them into contact with the proper university laboratories that is going to help them overcome that obstacle, that technological obstacle. So that's why we're really fostering and promoting innovation. Then when it comes to financing, of course, this is a key issue as well when it comes to innovation. So we do not fund anything. Let's be clear with that. We are not funding any projects, but we are really supporting project owner so that they can find financing. This is one of our key missions. So we have contact points at the national and regional level. National level, for example, the ADEME body. And for a few time now, we've also supporting projects when it comes to investment with the France 2030 project, or plan rather. This provided us with more avenues to financially support investment projects. So our role is to really facilitate innovation and making sure that these innovations are entering markets as soon as possible. Of course, here, depending on the maturity level of the technology, it can take more or less time, but we're here to help and make sure that we can indeed market innovations. And as I was saying, bringing together the universities and the private sector is very important to help that. Thank you very much. Thank you to the four of you for all of your contributions. That's a lot of food for thought.
Allez, petite minute. D'accord, d'accord.
Can I have a last word, maybe?
Alors attention, parce qu'une minute par Inazio, ça peut être très très long.
Le thème est relatif, c'est Einstein qui l'avait dit.
1 minute can last a very long time, so let's try and be brief. I just want to use that chance to share some thoughts on innovation. And more specifically, some thoughts on the type of association and collaboration that we need today. I remember projects such as Compostela Forest. We looked at the way we could overcome the challenges we were faced with at the time. We worked on structures. So we really worked on developing forests. But what do we need now? I'm not just talking about forest owners, but the entire forestry industry has to be much more innovative. And forest owners also have to implement innovations. They have to start cooperating. They have to integrate collaborative management as well. I'm going back on something that has been raised earlier in the conversation, but I really wanted to stress that point. Thank you very much.
Nous avons respecté le timing.
So you see, we are right on time.